Certain villains just have a way of evoking various discussions about them, and one of them is most definitely Hal Stewart, the villain of Megamind. And this mainly comes down to the fact that he starts out as such an unassuming man and character before he ends up becoming the biggest threat both Megamind and Metro City has ever had to face. But this has also led many to wonder, was Hal always a bad person and potential sociopath? Or did he simply succumb to the corruption of his powers because he was just not mentally strong enough to resist abusing them? And today, based off any and all evidence that can be gathered, I'd like to try and answer that question. And I once again have to give my warning that there are going to be spoilers ahead, so if you haven't seen the movie, you shouldn't be watching this video. Okay, so let's get right into it. Now, pretty much the main reason some suspect that Hal might have been a sociopath all along is because he never really shows concern for anybody other than himself, is just all around not a very pleasant person, and seems to desire Roxanne more out of lust and entitlement, almost as if seeing her as a prize to be won rather than as an actual human being and potential partner. But the thing is, none of that automatically makes him a sociopath. It makes him a guy girls would want to avoid at all costs, yes, but not a sociopath. Because, to give an extremely simplified version of it, a sociopath is a person who can't feel empathy and compassion for others, which makes them much more inclined to be self-centered and hurt people without a second thought if it's in their best interest to do so. Now keep in mind I am not an expert on this, and that it's not always guaranteed they'll behave this way. But due to their inability to feel sorry for other people, they're much more likely to. And Hal doesn't really start showing these particular traits until after he has almost limitless power and is very ticked off. Okay, so to backtrack a bit, what I'm trying to say here is that Hal most certainly doesn't have a big heart and is shown to not really care about anybody other than himself. However, he also does a decent job of socializing with Roxanne in his first scene, does initially seem ecstatic about the thought of being a superhero, even outside of what he can gain from it, does question what he's doing wrong in his pursuit of Roxanne, which does hint that, no matter how twisted, he may feel some kind of actual love towards her, and that he may not be motivated solely by lust. And, of course, is shown to be really angry that Megamind lied to Space Stepmom. Now, while that is pretty much meant to just be a throwaway line that was apparently improvised by Jonah Hill, this does end up providing the biggest hint that Hal isn't a sociopath, at least before he decides to fully embrace being a bad guy. Because sociopaths will usually only care about somebody if they can benefit them in some way. There can be exceptions to this, yes, but on the whole, if a sociopath is showing care towards somebody, it's because that person can do something good for them. So looking at it this way, if Hal had always been a sociopath, he would have absolutely no reason to feel angry on her behalf or be ready to kill Megamind as payback for lying to her. He has absolutely nothing he can gain from her at this point, and yet the thought of her being in any way hurt or insulted makes him really angry, which shows that Hal is capable of feeling compassion for others. And in that same sentence, he also reveals that he hates lies and deception, especially towards somebody he perceives to be innocent, which is another hint that he wasn't a sociopath, as they have absolutely no problem about lying to anybody about anything, no matter who they are or how big the lie is. if it'll benefit them to do so. Now, I know that some of you will argue that the line is just as I described it before, a throwaway line that I'm reading too much into, and even when taken into consideration, it isn't impossible for Hal to still have been a sociopath even with everything I just listed. And that is most definitely true. But at the same time, I still don't think he was incapable of feeling love and compassion for others. He seems to genuinely enjoy Space Dad and Space Stepmom's company, and when he sees Roxanne on a date with Bernard after she rejects him, he looks genuinely heartbroken. Not vindictive, not angry, and not like it's his ego that's just been crushed. Just completely heartbroken, like any normal person seeing the person they love or have a crush on dating and enjoying themselves with somebody else. Which once again implies that, no matter how screwed up it was, that he did have some kind of genuine feelings for Roxanne. Maybe rather self-centered ones, yes, but that he still probably in some way did actually care for her nonetheless. Because another thing to keep in mind here is, there are plenty of people in the real world who are just callous, self-centered jerks that aren't sociopaths. They aren't incapable of feeling compassion and care for others, but are still extremely selfish nonetheless. And for my money, that's what I believe Hal is before his transformation. Just an unpleasant man who really only cares about himself, but not to the point that he's a sociopath. Now, there's still the fact that he has a rather unhealthy obsession with Roxanne, but again, a person doesn't need to be a sociopath to feel some pretty messed up things towards the people they're attracted to. And on that topic, there's also the fact that he never acts on these feelings. He never tries to force himself on Roxanne or be aggressive with her. He does try to be nice to her and think of ways to get her to care about him. Now, I'm not saying this in any way makes him a good person, or that he should be congratulated for that, or that it makes him any less of a creep. Just solely that it's less likely he's a sociopath because of it. Now, once Roxanne rejects him and Megamind ticks him off, Hal clearly starts showing signs of being a sociopath. But I believe that's simply him being susceptible to the corruption of his powers. As I mentioned in a previous video, the famous saying goes, absolute power corrupts absolutely, which, in short, means that the more power a person has, the less morals they'll have. And when they have limitless power, they usually abandon morality altogether, which is rather true. Every single dictator in history, no matter how they appeared when they started, always ended up the same way by the end of their rule. Only a select few people in this world could handle having absolute power without abusing it, and a person like Hal is most definitely not one of them. Think about it. He's a self-centered, entitled jerk who feels that everybody pushes him around. Even if he was capable of feeling compassion beforehand, it was basically a foregone conclusion that he would let the essentially limitless powers of Metro Man go to his head the moment things didn't go his way, and before long abandon his morals completely when he realizes he can do anything he wants and get away with it. In short, I believe it was the corruption and temptation of his powers that turned Hal into a sociopath, and not that he was that way to begin with. Now, please keep in mind that this is only my personal opinion on the subject, and that there is a lot more that could be dissected from this. And if you disagree with my take on it, that's fine. And when you really stop and pull apart this character, the answer to that question could really go either way. He shows just enough traits to suggest that he could have been a sociopath, while at the same time showing just enough traits to suggest that he isn't one. So it is a really hard question to try and answer. But as I just said, for my money, I don't think he was. He was most definitely no good Samaritan and had a lot of issues, but I just feel that calling him a sociopath is a bit of a stretch. Again, you don't have to agree with me on that, but that's my personal take on the character. But what's also important to remember is that, sociopath or not, Hal Stewart is still by no means a role model, and that he was so susceptible to the corruption of his powers for a reason. Basically, regardless of what he was, the most important aspect of Hal's character might just be that he's the perfect example of the kind of person nobody should want to be. Okay, that pretty much wraps this up. So now I'd like to hear what you think. Do you believe that Hal Stewart was always a sociopath? Or do you believe he was capable of feeling compassion before he was corrupted by his powers? Please feel free to let me know in the comments. And thank you all for watching. I really appreciate it. And I hope to see you all next time.